Okay, I'm talking about Hrothgar Society benefits. Now, there's basically two broad categories of benefits to joining Hrothgar Society, and they both interlap and they're both intertangled with each other. But just to simplify it, you have your immediate individual benefits. These are the fact that you can network for business purposes, you can find friends, you can date people who meet a certain level of quality, you can learn new things about business or life in general, you can practice martial arts or better yourself. And these are kind of immediate benefits, and they're individual personal benefits that you get from joining the society. But then there's a larger social context. This means that you're creating a better society for your children and your grandchildren to live in. And you're dealing with social issues, politics and religion and philosophy and things like that. So I'm going to focus on the broader social issues in this video. And they're extremely important, though, to our personal success and our long-term success. But before I get to that, I want to cover a few common issues of people who contact me. The first issue is I've been working on this for many years, and it takes a long time to think of, just to put the ideology together and keep refining it and keep editing it. And the approach, it's constantly editing the website, constantly editing the literature, constantly thinking of new ideas and improving things. And just many, many years of research, reading lots of books on subjects relevant to putting something like this together. And I've never really fully launched it. I've just been working on putting websites together, putting a video together, putting books together, and trying to discuss and refine the ideology more than anything, and testing the waters and seeing where things go. But despite that I haven't really advertised, and I haven't really put it out there to the public yet, really. I mean, it's out there, you can find the website and the videos and things like that, but I haven't really put out a final product that I'm ready to promote. Despite that, I have a huge interest. When I first started trying to publish my book, I was just working on it. It was just rough drafts that I was loading up to a self-publishing site, and they were selling, and I even clicked on the site like, don't sell this book. I put on there, don't buy it, and people were buying the book, which I was like, who's buying these books? I mentioned some of this stuff in a few forums, but the website, sometimes I have 100 unique visitors a day, and there's no advertisement for the site anywhere, which is odd. I'm just like, who's visiting the site? So there's actually a huge interest. Even when I talk to people personally, there are so many people with their hand out, so many people that seem interested in making money or furthering themselves in life, being able to do better in life. But the factor here is they're all low quality people. When I try to sit down and talk to them and have an honest conversation, they act like idiots. They tell me they know how to rewrite my book. They skim through it, they don't even read the book, and they tell me they know how to make it better. They can tell me, I've been working on this community for years, I've been working on this ideology for years, but in 5 minutes they can tell me how to do everything better than that, and they're just completely stupid. When I ask them to take an IQ test, they're offended by it. They feel a personal sense of inferiority. Everything offends them, but they constantly insult me at the same time. And the reason I mention this is so many people seem to think that I'm desperate for a member, like, oh, I'm just a person by myself and I can't find anybody and I desperately need them to join. And that's not really the case. It's just that I have standards. I mean, I get so much interest in this community, it's unreal, and I'm not even trying. But the thing is that I need people who meet certain minimum qualifications, and they're very simple, very basic standards, but it's just everyone I deal with is an idiot. And it's similar even in non-Hrothgar activities. If I need a roommate, I can put an ad on Craigslist, and I can get 100 replies in a day, 100 people that want to be my roommate, but they're all unreliable. None of them can pay their bills on time. They have criminal records, their drug addictions and things. So the problem is not finding people. There's so many people that respond to offers and programs and opportunities. It's just that finding suitable people is the real problem and the real difficulty, and that's where the challenge lies. But let's go on to the broader ideology, larger social context. Now, obviously, we can discuss any number of philosophical, religious, or social issues, but I'm going to focus on the main issues that bother me and that matter to me. And the main issue is that one of the things you have to understand before joining Hrothgar Society is that the world is full of morons and it's incompetent. Our leaders are incompetent, political leaders, religious leaders. I mean, most of the world are stupid, stupid people. And most people I meet, they don't believe that. They believe that the world is a perfect place and problems will solve themselves. Our leaders are really smart and they'll figure out a solution. And things generally are just in the world and things generally run smoothly. And I feel completely the opposite. I feel like most people are idiots and this leads to unnecessary problems. Most of our leaders, our political leaders, our social leaders, our intellectual leaders, they're idiots. They cause unnecessary problems. And humanity itself is being held back by stupidity. And we can't rely on the government. We can't rely on these other institutions. We need a more elite organization with higher standards and higher capabilities. So that is really a conflict of ideology where the average person I meet, they're not willing to challenge the world and take a responsibility for repairing the world. They want to feel that submit themselves to authority and to other people because they believe in the competence of these leaders. And they believe if they work hard and do their job correctly that they'll be rewarded, that the person running the business is running it correctly. But when I work for another person, usually they're mismanaging the business and this negatively affects me. I feel like I could manage this business better, probably myself, if I had the resources to do so. But, that's one of the big things that you might want to weed yourself out. If you feel like, if I say, well, the bank ripped me off, I went to the bank, they ripped me off, they committed all kinds of crimes, I contacted the, I can't remember, the government organization that regulates banks. I contacted them, they wouldn't do anything about the laws being broken, I dealt with corrupt cops, and, and I tell people this and they're like, no, it must be something you're doing. The bank would never rip anybody off. The government would never be incompetent. That's the attitude that I constantly deal with people. And if you have that attitude that, everything is hunky-dory and the world is fine, you probably shouldn't be in Prosper Society. So now scoot that aside. Let's deal with a broader social context. I deal with a huge amount of discrimination, hatred towards white males, hatred towards whites, towards males, to a lesser extent hatred towards rich people or successful people or those with high IQs or those that are good looking. And it's kind of this cultural Marxist paradigm. And again, let's get back to why we have these idiotic beliefs and ideas, because most people are stupid. They don't think. They're like animals. They don't really read a book or sit down and think about ideologies. They just kind of act. So they act in stupid ways, inconsistent ways. So this is probably the greatest threat to our society, is this hostility, both on a racial level and on a competence level, where they kind of attack people for being competent and they promote the incompetent. And at the same time, white people especially are attacked. And I just saw on the news where Syrian refugees were coming into Europe, and one of the news reporters kicked one of the refugees down so that a cop chasing the refugee could catch him. And that reporter is now evil and fired from their job and everything like that. But it's interesting to see that the United States and Europe can bomb Syria, kill children, kill hundreds of thousands of people, kill innocent civilians, and they don't care. They don't care about the Syrians. They could care less. But when the Syrians come into a European nation and want to settle there, all of a sudden it's all about compassion and giving them a free house and free piles of money and free clothes and incentives that they're getting more than I have. I mean, I would go to Europe if Europe would offer me that, And it's the same thing where Europe, they don't have money for the white Germans that are broke and that are living on the streets, kids that are 10 years old living on the streets and hungry. And Germany doesn't have money to support their own kids, but they can give a free business to a Syrian refugee and allocate billions of dollars to these foreigners coming into the nation. And it doesn't take a genius to see the bias that exists here, that there is a clear bias towards promoting non-whites and to eliminating white communities. Whenever there's a white community anywhere, a white school or something like that, they bus in black people, and it's racist to have a bunch of white people. But a black community is not racist. They don't need to diversify the black community. They don't need to diversify a Jewish community. So, I mean, it's just illogical. It's harmful. And even though most of it comes from just human stupidity, there is a seed of it coming from Jewish supremacism. And the thought behind this is you have the Jewish Federation, B'nai B'rith, the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, and things like that. And their thought is, never again. We're never going to have a Holocaust again. So what can we do to make sure that the Holocaust doesn't happen? Well, we can create a more diverse society. We can basically turn white people into a tiny minority so that the Nazis could never rise again. And that's basically where their tactics are. And that might make sense to a degree if it was done with a soft hand. But while it's a brilliant strategy, the actual execution of that strategy is extreme and overzealous. And the way they execute that strategy is in a way that's harmful to everyone. And there's another factor too, is something that I write about a lot in the Hofstra literature, is when you look at when the Nazis actually invaded Poland, they killed off all the intellectuals. And they said, we're going to turn Poland into a nation of peasants and slaves. And the Soviet Union did the same thing. And actually China, when the communists took over China, they killed all the intellectuals and the upper crust of people. And it's generally an ideology of people that they tear others down so that they can comparatively be better. If you make everyone else stupid, your reign as king is not threatened by anyone. And it's kind of a race to be last. It's kind of a stupid way to go about life, but it is a motivation in some people who maybe have a lot of money and power and control the media, and people who control multi-billion-dollar charities and social policies and have very powerful lobbies in Washington, D.C. and things like that. So there is an element, a seed there of those things, but that seed would not be able to manifest if it wasn't for the fact that the average person is a moron and willing to go along with these idiotic policies. So to me, these policies are leading to a less competitive nation, a less competitive world, more third world conditions. Now you have to ask yourself, why don't these Jews move to Africa? If they hate Aryans so much, why don't they move to a third world nation? And the reason why is because you can't make a lot of money in a third world nation, because there's no law and order, contracts aren't honored, your employees are not going to work very hard, they're not going to be reliable, they're going to steal from you, your customers are going to steal from you, your customers aren't going to pay on time. And when you're dealing with people who operate on a very low level like that, it's hard to extract profit out of that. Unless you're dealing with a very basic resource extraction like minerals, like mining minerals or diamonds or something like that. But any kind of complex civilization, complex business, you're going to have a difficult time extracting profit or creating nice, livable neighborhoods when people act that way. So, but at the same time, they recognize that it's probably not desirable to move to a dysfunctional place. At the same time, they're turning their own nations into dysfunctional nations. So what I look at is we may not be able to change the world. We may not be able to change the nation. We may not be able to change the minds of our political leaders, but we can try to cope with these changes. We can think of ways to minimize their negative impact. How can we protect ourselves from the rising tide of crime? How can we protect ourselves in a nation that's increasingly corrupt? How can we thrive in a nation whose average IQ keeps going down? How can we survive in a nation that's mismanaged and dysfunctional? And that's really what I want to look at in Hofstra society, answering those questions. Like, we see these broader social trends. We see that crime's going up, that poverty's going up, that a lot of the leadership is incompetent, a lot of things are being mismanaged. And we see that white people are increasingly discriminated against. We see there's a hostility towards the rich and towards the smart and successful. And we see these problems mounting and getting worse every year. So how can we both minimize those things? We do want to try at least to influence social policy and influence society to not be so stupid, but that may be in vain. I mean, we may not just probably don't have the numbers or the resources to really make too much of a dent. But how can we protect ourselves? Are there places we can move that are more functional, that are not as poorly managed? Are there places we can move where the discrimination isn't so bad? Are there enclaves, private communities we can create that sort of serve as an oasis from the crime and the stupidity and the problems? And that is one of the broader things we need to focus on as a long-term strategy. How can we protect ourselves from this dysfunction? And as a short-term strategy, we can focus on personal goals. How can we business network? How can we make more money? How can we help each other succeed? How can we help each other with their goals? If your goal is to go to college, I'm going to help you go to college. I'm going to help you get into the school you want to get into. If your goal is to start a business, I'm going to help you start a business. Each member is going to help each other on their personal goals, and also in raising families and in furthering this culture and this worldview of Trotskyianism. So that's all for now.